Welcome. This is Joe Holbrook with Cloud Bursting Corp down in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a CompTIA SME and also a CompTIA certified as well in numerous areas. I'm looking forward to doing this review session with everyone and getting you prepared to take the CompTIA Security Plus certification. Now, we'll get into the details of the certification here in a second. A quick little intro. I'm the owner of Cloud Bursting Corp, based out of Jacksonville, Florida, mainly a cloud and IT security consulting training organization. I am also been focused mainly around training lately in cloud architecture. And one of the areas I specialize in is around cloud security, especially around Amazon Web Services mainly. Been a government contractor off and on for about 10 years. Hold pretty much the certifications to fill the DoD mandates as well. And we'll talk more about what the DoD 8570 is. Mainly focused around security, around the federal government, subject matter expert for CompTIA. I help participate. I help wrote some of the JTAs around the Cloud Essentials and Cloud Plus. I also hold numerous certs from EMC, HPE, VMware, AWS, GCP, and of course CompTIA. Now, one of the interesting facts about CompTIA Security Plus is this is, definitely one of their more popular certifications. And I think a lot of that was driven by the requirements of the Department of Defense as well as the State Department mandating specific employees and contractors to go and get a security certification to use the government IT equipment essentially to log onto the networks, etc. Now, there is a short video about Security Plus from CompTIA. We'll just show you where that is. You're welcome to view that on your own. Exam objectives. I'm going to cover those in detail because there's only 6 objectives, but again, depending on what you study and how you study, this could make the difference between you passing and not passing the first time. And at $320 or so, I believe, it's still going to be an expensive exam to not pass. So my objective here is to help guide you through passing the test. Now I'm going to cover some exam content, some of the content we'll cover in the 3 to 5 day sessions of CompTIA Security Plus. Now again, a lot of the content, would be, worked through over, a few days or a week in most cases. So a lot of that has to do is there labs involved or is there not? So. And we'll talk about taking the exam, and then I threw in some practice questions I'm going to go through to get you thinking about how you'll be tested on the exam. And then I'll go through some tips. So let's talk about the cybersecurity career pathway. This career path was released by CompTIA to help guide organizations as well as their participating contractors, employees, consultants, etc., to be able to understand where the certifications fit in based on experience and technical aptitude. Now, the Security Plus, as you see, is basically considered a mid-tier cert. Now, this is a professional cert essentially, and I wouldn't call this a simple cert. And lastly, I think if you get the Security Plus, then you're pretty knowledgeable in not only IT security, but also areas around like networking to a degree as well. So again, I think this is a great cert for someone trying to get into the IT world, but also prove that they have a baseline knowledge around IT security. And I have some other sessions that I've done on CSA as well as CASP. Now, CSA, this is their newest cert. This is a cybersecurity analyst. I have a separate session on that, and actually I get several that are being worked on now as well. So let's talk about why, if you're in the IT industry, let's just say you're working for a commercial company, why do you need a security certification? Now, first of all, probably one of the main reasons is that it should establish you as knowledgeable and give you that baseline as well. Because one of the things that I have done as working as a lead tech, a hiring, first point of contact essentially, is I always like to look for folks that have a baseline certification. And again, if you don't have a baseline certification, then it's really hard to gauge, what knowledge you really have without spending significant time quizzing you. And so if I see you have CASP or CISSP or Security Plus, then I know you have the basic knowledge about how to distinguish between a virus, and let's say a DDoS attack. Again, very simple concepts, but you'll be surprised how many IT folks that you'll run into over your career that could not tell you how a DDoS attack is actually implemented, or why someone would want to run that against a company. Now, again, the goal is to baseline your knowledge. So if you get Security Plus, then the hiring folks of the company that you're talking to should have comfort level that you have baseline knowledge. So one of the things also is, depending on your industry, a lot of organizations, commercial, not just government, do require basic security certs. This is very common. Even if you look on LinkedIn and you look at the jobs that are posted there, you'll see that usually they like to see CASP or they like to see CISSP. So some kind of baseline knowledge is required. Now, if you're in the government sector, this is almost a guarantee, especially like in the DoD or the State Department, but also the intelligence agencies. Even though there's no directives for a lot of the other agencies, they like to, establish a baseline as well. Now, some of the certs that are IT focused could be CompTIA Security Plus, CAS, CSA, CISSP, CISA by ISC, and then CCNA Security by Cisco. There's numerous others, but I'm just giving you a sort of, a comparable baseline here. So again, why do you, need a security cert? So let's go ahead and talk about the military folks and the government contractors. Now, I of course had the opportunity to work on a fair number of government contracts. I lived in DC for a while as well. And one of the things I can tell you is that without a CASP or a Security Plus, as well as a server cert as well, like Linux Plus or Server Plus, then you're going to be pretty much hitting a brick wall. And what I mean by that is that it is still a mandate that if you have privileged access, like over here, that you need to get some kind of certification that is ANSI approved, and these are listed over here. This is, again, they have the IAT level. These are the access levels and the certs that are required by those. And you'll see that Security Plus is IAT level 2 and IAM level 1. And so this gives you some baseline administrator access in most organizations. Now, the 8570M directive, this is still in force, even though there's been a lot of talk and a lot of postings about the changes coming up around requiring 8570. That has not, to my knowledge, been implemented yet. I believe it's going to be DoD 8410, I believe. I don't exactly the new acronym, but that still has not been enforced yet. But for the time being, and I was just up working with the State Department actually a couple months ago, and they still require these certs for folks to manage any State Department information systems. So again, this is the certification directive here by DoD. Okay, there's a short video. I'm going to post the link here. This is from the CompTIA website about why you want to take the CompTIA Security Plus. It goes into the benefits of taking the certification. So let's talk about the objectives. Let's talk about basically what you need to know to take the test and what you want to study. Now, of course, in a 40 to 50 minute session, it's hard to go into all the details. But what I'm going to do is give you a good start, and again, I'll have some links for you to research as well in the YouTube channel as well. Now, the first part is network security. So we're going to talk about everything from network devices to basic networking. We'll talk about network appliances like firewalls. We'll talk about routers. We'll talk about ports and anything around the network that you would expect. Well, now I also have a chapter that I would normally teach during a 3-day session inserted into this. I'm going to cover. So we're going to talk about domain number 1.0. And again, it's hard to cover everything in a short session like this, but the goal is to get you thinking and give you the resources to be successful. So domain 2, this is going to be focused around compliance and operational security. Now, basically compliance being what? Compliance is going to be around, being able to understand how a governance perspective and a regulatory perspective, you may need to set up your IT infrastructure. So for example, compliance requirements could be HIPAA, but it also could be governance directives from the organization as well. So for example, PII data, we'll talk about that in our class. Lots of open areas around compliance. Operational security. Now this area here is again, I call this the common sense area basically, because a lot of this just comes down to just paying attention. This is what operational security is. So for example, you don't write down your password and leave a sticky pad on your keyboard, okay? Again, common sense. We'll talk about what are some of the devices like biometrics. We'll talk about man traps. We'll talk about allowing access through various means like remote access, for example. Domain 3, this is a heavily weighted area of the test. And we'll talk about different threats and vulnerabilities. So this is where we'll talk about what a DDoS attack is. We're going to talk about other threats like insider threats and external threats. We'll talk about viruses, and we'll talk about Smurf attacks, and this is again a heavily weighted area on the test. 4.0, this is where we want to talk specifically around tightening down your applications. We'll talk about data transmissions. We'll talk about protocols essentially here, and host security like IDSs, for example, or host-based IDSs as well. Access control, identity management. This is going to be an area that traditionally I've found a lot of folks find pretty darn boring. Again, what we try to do is make this as exciting as possible and talk about everything from passwords to ACLs to having radius and TACACs and other areas like that. And then finally, cryptography. This is, again, we'll talk about the different forms of cryptography, different algorithms. This is probably, in my opinion, the toughest module from what I have seen. A lot of folks, they just don't get 6.0 well. And this one here needs a whole module on itself to really get you updated. And it's a very important module, especially, if you're not totally strong in the other domains. Okay, so let's talk about domain one. So basically, domain one is going to comprise different areas around the network. So let's talk about network devices. Now, network devices are going to be critical to your infrastructure. So therefore, they should have a focus for you and your organization in most cases. So one of the challenges that I have found has been mainly around finding qualified people that know the network but also know security. Believe it or not, a lot of security folks are great at checklists, but they're absolutely horrible at network security. I mean, again, this is all relative in the sense of where you come from. And I think a lot of that may also be based on market segments, verticals as well. But what I have traditionally found is, again, network folks are really good at, configuring the networks, routing and switching and understand protocols like BGP and, areas like that. But when it comes to security, they try to avoid a lot of that in a lot of cases. So one of the things you need to do as an organization is to be able to find the right people that know the network but also know security. This is, not a negotiable area nowadays. Now, again, we all read the news. There's plenty of hack attacks, plenty of network attacks. Whether you're in the cloud or whether you're managing your own infrastructure, this is a huge concern. So let's talk about some of the devices that you're going to need to focus on. Firewalls. Again, basic area security. A firewall is going to essentially act as essentially a network appliance in a lot of cases. It could also be its own piece of hardware. It really depends on the vendor in the situation that you set up as. So you could use anything from, it could be, Checkpoint, it could be from HP, it could be, Palo Alto, whoever the vendor is that you're using. You need to understand that the firewall has different configuration variables. Now, we'll talk about, for example, how a firewall works here in a few seconds, but just understand the basics that a firewall could be, any kind of config in reality. So it could be hardware, software, or a combination of both. Now, a dual home firewall has two network interfaces. Now, I highlighted that for a reason. Now, on the test, you may get some questions about, how exactly a firewall is going to be set up and configured. And again, knowing how many ports is important as well. So again, we'll talk about the different types here in a second, so just hold on. I just wanted to cover some of the real basic stuff. So a firewall also, I highlighted this, a firewall also is used to create a DMZ. That's the demilitarized zone. So again, remember a DMZ, is essentially an area where you're going to segment from the corporate network as well as the internet. So this is called a DMZ. So how does a firewall work? Well, this is a good question. And again, every firewall from a technical perspective, a deep technical perspective, has different mechanisms that are going to work differently. But generally, a firewall is going to either allow traffic or deny traffic. At a high level, that's really what it's doing. And there's going to be packet filtering and ACLs, access control lists, for example. And some of the one of the protocols you'll want to know is called NAT. So NAT firewalls and routers are basically an interface between the LAN and the internet using one IP address. So again, these areas in red, I want you to know, highlight these for studying for the test. Make sure you understand this. A packet firewall looks at the data to obtain the source and destination addresses. So for example, if you're packet filtering and you have an HTTP request or a telnet request, whatever the protocol is, and it's going from this address to that address, and if you allow any address in that IP range to go through, then it'll allow it through. But let's say that if you deny certain IP address ranges, then that port will not allow that packet to go through and it'll drop that packet. So it'll be denied. Very simple to understand. It's basically, I like to call this the bit approach, where it's either on or off. There's no in between. Now, stateful packet filtering, this is where you look at what is essentially in the packet. This is, again, highlight that as well. I didn't highlight that, but again, know what stateful. One of the things on this test here is they don't want you to know the real super details of a firewall, but they do want you to know the different types and the different configuration approaches. And there will be usually there is an exercise or two on the test to make sure that you understand how to configure a firewall. Now, it's not any specific vendor. It's basically, if they give you an IP range, what would you select to basically allow that traffic to go through or be denied, whatever the question is asking you. So when you're configuring a firewall, a couple of things you want to think about. Remember, a firewall is generally at the very basic level, either on or off. That traffic is either going to be allowed or denied. It's on or off. It's no in between. And again, just understand that a firewall should typically be set up in a corporate network, and typically, in reality, most corporate networks have numerous firewalls. A solid, well-defined corporate network will have numerous firewalls that should protect different areas of the network from the corporate network and essentially the internet as well. And we'll talk more about that as well. One of the things I typically like to do is I like to, if I'm teaching a class, this is an area we like to whiteboard. And again, I don't know how easy it is on the screen for you to see this, but you could see that there's different IP addresses, and you'll have a firewall. And this firewall, being the bricks here, is going to either allow the traffic to go through to the DMZ or not. And so here's an example. You could see that you have a source and a destination. Now, again, a firewall is basically, all or nothing. You could see that over here to the right. It's allow and deny. So you have the source IP. This is where the traffic is coming from. Destination IP. This is where it's going, right? Very simple at a high level. And again, a lot of folks, until they have it broken down simply, don't understand firewalls at an initial level. But once you break it down and you understand that it's, basically what I call, it's like a logic. It's either, it's either on or off, or it's, allow or deny. It's no in between. So if the source IP is not in the allow, then that IP isn't going through. Again, this is not negotiable. Port. So the port is going to be typically any port. Now, commonly, any good firewall administrator, network administrator, is going to get very granular into the traffic types that they're going to allow. Now, as a best practice, you're not going to just allow unsecure protocols like Telnet or FTP just go into your network and out of your network. That's really not highly advised. If you're going to allow, FTP and Telnet, you need to have different layers set up and different security apparatus in place as well. Again, if there's a good reason to do that. There's more secure protocols to use in those, but in the old days, it used to be Telnet was very popular as well as FTP. Now, again, you could see that the last one, this source, basically is given a range. And you could see that if the IP address starts here and it, is in this subnet, the destination to this subnet will be basically port. It'll allow any port, but it's going to specifically deny TCP and UDP, and it will deny those protocols. Routers. Now, routers again, one of the things for the test, just like if you took the Network Plus, you're going to need to know what a switch is, what a router is, what a firewall is, what a repeater is. These are very basic network devices. So router is used to manage traffic, and usually they're used to connect segments together. Routers are layer 3. So now I'm saying that again. Routers operate at network layer 3. And I said that again. You'll likely see at least one question, or if not two questions, on the exam around this slide right here. So routers are tested. I know when I took the test, there was at least a couple questions just on routers. So do understand what routers are. Remember, network layer 3. And the goal of a router is to connect devices together, very simply put. I won't read all this to you. Again, just do realize that routers will be tested heavily. Now, routers use ACLs. Now, an ACL is an access control list. This is basically a directory saying, hey, if that traffic is allowed, it'll be in this list. If it's not, guess what? It's not in the list. It's basically policy or rule set driven. Depending on the vendor, most of the old line vendors like to call rule sets. Some of the other vendors like to use policies. It all depends. There's no right or wrong answer in that respect, but do understand that ACLs are going to mitigate traffic from going where it shouldn't go. SNMP. Now, SNMP is simple network management protocol. These are basically ways you can manage your devices. I would highlight SNMP, but actually you don't need to, because in the other sections we're going to talk mainly about ports and stuff as well. We don't talk too much about it in this module, but we will get to the protocols. Switches. Now, switches again are going to be something you want to know for the test. The goal of the switch is basically be like a bridge. It's going to connect two or more segments together. And so switches generally operate at a layer 2, but also they could operate at other layers, especially the newer switches. They typically will operate at layer 2 and layer 3 as well. It really depends on the vendor and how new that switch and the functionality you want to pay for. So for example, in the old days, for those folks that are over, let's say 35 or so, or actually 40 or so, I should say. You would know that in the old days, it was very common that you had to go get a switch, a router, a firewall, and you had separate devices for separate functions. Now, most of the vendors support multiple appliances, multi-purpose devices that are sold now. So again, you don't need to have a separate device to act as a switch, a router, and a firewall now. There's plenty of that capability built in to a lot of vendors. So whether you use Brocade or Cisco or Arista, whoever you're looking at, chances are they're going to support multiple layers in your device. Now, one of the areas that we'll get into is going to be the OSI model. Now, usually we do the OSI model pretty much right off the bat in the course because, once again, security is going to be multiple layered. And again, you just don't focus on layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 and just, think you're good. Security is going to have to focus on multiple layers. So applications need to have security developed into it. That's a best practice. However, we know that wasn't always the case. Physical security, frames, packets, segments, etc. Different layers of the OSI model you need to look at differently and attend to appropriately. So know what a hub is as well. Again, fairly simplistic. Now, on the test, you're likely going to run into some questions around SNMP. Now, SNMP, the goal of SNMP is to manage network devices. So essentially gives you the ability to be able to see what is going on different devices using a protocol that is essentially connectionless. So basically, if you're thinking of it from this perspective, let's say you want to go and pull what is going on your network switches, but also your storage devices, or let's say your virtual machine hosts or whatever you're trying to monitor. SNMP, again, has been a very popular protocol. But the problem with SNMP has been that traditionally it's inherently insecure. And so what I mean by that is typically that if you're sending traffic, that traffic isn't encrypted. It's not typically secure in the sense that someone could pick it up and figure out what it's about. And so generally, like, passwords would be sent as clear text, etc. Now, that's typically in version 1. Now, in version 2, depending on, now there's some variables there. I won't get too deep into the detailed differences between V1 and V2, but again, from a security standpoint, you want to use version 3. So, SNMP V3 is more secure in the sense that you're going to use a more secure protocol like SSH. Now, what are some best practices for securing a switch? You're going to want to, of course, physically lock up your switches. One of the things that I can definitely say is, depending on the industry you're in, you will likely not even be allowed in a data center during production hours in a lot of cases. Never mind be able to open up cabinets. TCP and UDP ports are managed properly, so basically you need to understand the protocols. MAC addresses. Now, a MAC address, again, if you took the course, we would spend about half an hour talking about MAC addresses. But a MAC address, this is basically how you identify a device. And this is a unique address on the network. It's not an IP address, but it's a way of addressing that device. And the MAC address has several principles around it as well that we'll talk about in detail if you take the course. Now, there are plenty of CompTIA classes available. Again, we'll touch on that here coming up. Now, what about taking the exam? Now, one of the challenges about taking the exam for a lot of people is the cost. Now, the cost on CompTIA's website, at least last time I checked, was $320. That's for US. Now, every country is going to have a different price in most cases. So if you're overseas in Europe or India or Asia or in South America, your pricing may be slightly higher or slightly less. I don't know, but double check that. The link here is right here. So if you go to CompTIA, you look at the schedule, you will see over here how to schedule the exam and all that. You click on, you have to open an account first, etc. And then if you go over here, there's different ways of testing. Like if you want to buy the exam, like go over here, and you can see again, it's making you create a login to do that. But if you go over here to the CompTIA Security Plus main page, you'll scroll down, you'll see the same exact thing that I'm showing you on the slide. And you can see that the price here is $320. If you go here, actually, I believe, let's see if that works. I haven't tried it. And it's making you take a survey. I'm going to pass over that. Exam prices. So it gives you all the different exam prices for most of the countries. And you'll see that they're in the local currency. So take a second to figure out what you're thinking of, where you're going to take it. So let's just talk a few things about when you take the test. A couple of things you want to think about. One of the challenges with the CompTIA exams is that they do actually seem to time them properly. And what I mean is this. Is that if you're knowledgeable in a subject area, you should have plenty of time to finish, or just enough time to finish in some cases. But if you're not knowledgeable in an area, then chances are you're not going to have enough time to answer all the questions, and therefore you're going to time out. So my thought is this. If you're not able to take, and there's plenty of practice exams out there, if you just Google CompTIA Plus practice exams, you're going to find a boatload of different options. I have some options as well on my YouTube channel as well. If you're not able to answer the questions in a prompt manner, in a competent manner where you get at least 70-80% right, then I wouldn't recommend taking the test until you can get past that point. That's just my thought. Because one of the things about this test, as well as a lot of other CompTIA tests, is that they are performance-based. And so performance-based means that essentially it's going to change the questions. It's going to react to how you answer the questions. So if you do poor on a certain subject area, then chances are, again, the algorithm for this and how CompTIA does it is not really known well, and it's, again, that's a secret, I guess. But just realize that you're gonna you may see more certain topic areas than what you might like. So if you're weak on network security, you may get tested more on that than maybe on cryptography. So again, no one really knows how that really works in the back end, at least at a public level, but just realize that that's what could happen. 90 minutes. You have 90 minutes to take the test. That's an hour and a half for 90 questions. So again, that's a maximum. Another thing I want to point out is 90 questions maximum. You may get 85. You may get 87. That's going to depend on how you do on the test from a performance level, but also CompTIA typically likes to put out there some questions that are more beta. In other words, they update the question poll to see how people are doing. And again, you may or may not get graded on the questions. I've seen on some CompTIA exams where they say that there'll be some additional questions and you may or may not get quizzed on them from a grade level. So they're more just out there to just get to collect information, I guess is the way to say it. Okay, now there's a short video here. I always like to show the classes when I teach the Security Plus or CASP, any security related course. The Sophos, this is actually by Sophos actually. If you click on the link, go to the video. I'm going to leave the link under the video description as well. It's sort of a funny video, but if you're going to get into security, again, it just gives you some thoughts on, what you want to think of and what users do typically. So short little video, I recommend you take a minute to take a look at it. It's a good laugh, but it's actually what happens typically in a typical environment. Okay, so let's talk about some questions. Now, I went in and I put 5 questions. Now, again, I could have done more, but I want to keep the session under an hour as a best practice. My questions. So question number 1. This is going to be a basic network protocol question. So when you're designing a network, so let's think of it this way. If you're designing a network and you want the devices to share one public IP address when they're traversing the internet so that you don't have your whole IP range essentially, sent out to the internet when Sally surfs the internet or when Jack surfs the internet. You want to use a protocol to do that. And that is called PAT, P-A-T. And again, we'll talk more about PAT in the session. So number 2, you're working as a security administrator and you see some suspicious activity on your network. You believe you have a breach. So again, if you see suspicious activity, what do you think you're going to do, right? And it basically, the question is not really asking you what you're going to do in this case. It's asking you maybe what kind of appliance could you use to have stopped this intrusion. And so typically a network intrusion prevention system is actually probably the best answer. So again, when you're taking the test, you're going to typically find that 2 of the answers will be somewhat similar in a lot of cases. This is not, true for every question, but generally as a best practice, when you're developing test questions, you're going to want to have 2 of the answers very, very similar to where the test taker should definitely, if they know what they're doing, be able to distinguish between the 2. But if they're not sure, they're going to go, is it, A or B? Is it C or D? That's the goal, is to make sure that the person who has the knowledge is going to get the right answer. And the person that isn't sure of the knowledge should have a 50-50 chance of, selecting the wrong answer. And then the other 2 answers typically would be answers to the question that would not even be relative if you had a clue at all. So that's generally the approach that most vendors use when it comes to answers in a question. So again, think of it that way. Now, intrusion detection system is different from an intrusion prevention system. And again, if you understand that detection is meant to, it's sort of like that commercial. If anyone has seen those commercials, from LifeLock, I think it is, sort of funny, where you have a security card in a bank and there's a robbery and the lady on the ground is saying, aren't you going to do something? There's a robbery. And he goes, oh no, I'm just a security monitor. I'm not a guard. So, that's the difference between detection and prevention. Are you going to react or not? So, A firewall, of course, we know a firewall is going to not really prevent. If the port is allowed, it's going to allow it in. If it's denied, it's going to not allow it in. And then a honeypot is totally off the wall in the sense that they don't typically prevent intrusions, but what they do is keep the hacker or hackers busy, let them traverse the honeypot to figure out, to let them, see what they could get away with, but also it gives the network administrators and security administrators an idea of what the hackers are looking for, what protocols they're using, etc. That's a honeypot. Question 3. Which of the following flags are used for TCP to establish a connection? Well, this is where you need to know the stack. You need to know how a transmission is sent and received. You have ACK, SYN, reboot, and FIN. Now, if you know when you establish a connection that acknowledge is ACK and basically synchronize is SYN, then you should get that fairly quickly on the test. Now, FIN is used to what? To basically terminate a session. So that would not be correct. And then reboot is totally off the wall. And again, nothing to do with connection or anything when it comes to the TCP flags. Question 4. Now, again, this is where you want to think of security as a multiple TCP IP protocol stack approach. So a lot of the questions on the test are going to test you on how well you know the different layers. Layer 1 versus layer 2. So is it physical? Is it data link? Is it network? Is it application? You need to know the layers. And when we go through the boot camps, one of the things I like to do is I whiteboard this, and I generally like to source a room for the right answers to see how people are grasping it. It's very important you know the layers for this test, because if you don't, again, you're going to probably not have a positive result if you don't have everything else in the exam content knowledge ready for your taking the test. So again, I can't reiterate TCP layers. It's definitely not the most exciting part for a lot of folks, but you need to know it. So layer 7, that's when you're doing HTML. Remember, HTML is what? That is application layer. And number 5, you are now a newly minted Security Plus expert. Your new role, you're expected to block web traffic from Iceland because of numerous issues from that country. And I'm not picking on Iceland, I'm just throwing it in there, just sort of, instead of picking on Russia or China or North Korea, I just figured I'd throw in Iceland. And again, so the goal of the question is for you to understand that you need to block a certain country from your network. And so how do you do that? How do you block specific countries such as Iceland? And again, there's 3 choices. This is a select 3 question. You also find on the CompTIA exams, they love to ask multiple answer questions. So this is where you need to know not 1, but probably 2 or 3 proper answers on the test. So what are the 3 choices? URL filtering, right? This is where you're going to select essentially specific URLs that are allowed or denied. This is essentially an approach where you're basically it's a quasi firewall in its own effect. A proxy, right? A proxy is similar to a firewall and URL filtering in some ways, but again, it's how it's implemented that's the difference. And then a firewall. So for the test, you'd want to know those 3 answers. Now, why is HIDS incorrect? Now, host intrusion detection, that's going to be host level. Again, you want to block web traffic from a network layer, in this case, just by reading the question. It's not stated, but you would expect to at least assume that. And then spam has absolutely nothing to do with blocking traffic, from country as well. And again, it says web, so you should expect that that would be what, HTML, port 80, 8080, 443, whatever web traffic you're blocking. So again, those are just some examples of questions you may get on the test. Different styles of questions as well. Now, there's also scenario-based questions as well you'll get, as well as you'll likely get some pictures, and then you'll need to open up the example and be able to pick the right answer from that as well. So that's the end of this short session. As promised, we try to keep it under an hour. For those folks interested on keeping up on what I'm doing, other sessions I'm doing as well, content I'm putting out, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, my website, also my YouTube channel as well. I want to thank everyone for joining. I do wish everyone much success in your careers on taking the test as well. And, again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions and if I could be of assistance. And lastly, again, if anyone needs any help around the cloud, IT security, data storage, these are areas I've focused on from a technical perspective for the last 10 plus years or 15 years at this point as well. So thank you again. I really enjoyed working with everyone. I do hope everyone has much success in your career.